2008 has been a really good year for the General Assembly of Virginia. In a very challenging budgetary environment, we worked cooperatively, both houses, both parties, the legislature and executive, to reform the mental health system, to significantly reform the foster care system, to do a significant advance in pre-K education, and to do the biggest ever investment in college capital construction. And we did all that in a tough time by having strong opinions, but working with each other, listening to each other, compromising, and finding solutions. That needs to set the tone for what we do over the next few weeks, because our work isn't done. We have one other very big item to address, and it's the issue of transportation. And that demands the same level of intense work, dialogue, compromise. It demands a solution. All of you know that in 2002, in 2004, and in 2006, the governor and legislature worked for transportation improvement, and in each of those 3 years, no solutions were forthcoming. There was a referendum in 2002, the two regions that didn't pass. In 2004, there was an effort in the budget reform to include transportation that was unsuccessful, and then in 2006, we had a regular session and 2 special sessions about transportation without any positive movement, without any consequence or advance on the needs of the Commonwealth. In 2007, the legislature presented to me, and I worked with them and ultimately signed, and they agreed to a compromise bill, House Bill 3202. Give credit to the Speaker and all involved in that bill, because there's much good in that bill that still persists: a better focus on land use management, bonds for critical road improvement projects, increased funding for transit. When you combine those with some of the things we've done in the administration to better manage land use and to improve the efficiency of VDOT, which 6 years ago was 20% on time in its projects and only 51% on budget. Last year, 86% on time, 91% on budget. There has been some good done, but the events of the last few months, with the repeal of the abuser fees, which was the only real aspect of last year's bill that helped us deal with the state's growing maintenance challenges, and with the Supreme Court decision striking down the 2 regional packages. Those 2 items, the repeal and the Supreme Court decisions, together with reductions in transportation revenues at the federal level and some reductions we're seeing at the state level, have put us in a very difficult situation with a problem that is going to get worse and continue to deepen unless we act, and act in a resolved manner. So I'm going to call a special session of the legislature and have them come back on June the 23rd, a Monday. I'm going to be out around the state between now and then, the next 6 weeks, talking about the problem, but more importantly, a proposal to fix it. And I announced today my best effort, having worked with and dialogued with all 4 caucuses and many out in the community, a compromise plan that I'm going to submit to the General Assembly that I think meets the state's needs. The plan that I'm going to discuss here in some detail is simple, it's sustainable, and it's statewide. It provides the funding that we need to advance 21st century transportation solutions. The plan relies on revenue sources that are well understood by the General Assembly, previously identified by the General Assembly, in many cases previously voted on by the General Assembly. And these are revenue sources that are familiar, and that if we act to put them in place, they will grow over time to make sure that the funds that we need will grow as the system needs growth. There are 3 major goals that I'll discuss with you that this plan addresses. Safety first is the first goal. Regional relief is the second goal. And transportation change is the third. All funds that are raised in this transportation plan will include a lockbox mechanism so that the revenue sources expire if dollars are ever used for any purpose other than specifically indicated in the legislation that we'll have introduced. Safety first. Last year, for the first time since Virginia significantly stiffened drunk driving laws, more than 1,000 deaths occurred on Virginia's roads. Our roads and bridges are getting older. Most of Virginia's bridges are over 45 years old. 8% of them need replacement, and replacements of bridges are not cheap. We all watched with horror this summer as an interstate bridge in Minnesota collapsed, and so the consequences of not focusing on maintenance are very obvious and potentially severe. The congestion of our roads creates other safety challenges. Emergency vehicles are not able to get to emergencies in a prompt fashion in congested parts of the state. And in the Hampton Roads area, where we always have to worry about the need for hurricane evacuation, congestion clouds that situation and leads to unacceptable delays in evacuating people in the event of weather emergencies. We have a maintenance deficit right now of $375 million, which is growing significantly as construction costs increase. The maintenance deficit is worsening. The maintenance deficit at some point completely overtakes our ability to engage in new construction. And as that happens, the federal dollars that we're able to draw down for new construction dramatically reduce and disappear. And so we have to fix this maintenance deficit. It's about maintenance, but it's also about truth in budgeting. You know, we have a maintenance budget and we have a new capacity construction budget. We've gotten into a habit, and this is something that the legislature understands and approves because we have to. We've gotten into a habit of going into the construction and new capacity budgets for transit and rail and just at year end taking out all the money that we need for maintenance. We need to fix that so that we put enough money into maintenance so that we don't have to cobble together at the end of each year dollars for maintenance out of the transportation capacity, the Transportation Trust Fund. If we address the deficit, the maintenance deficit, we'll stabilize the funding that we need to keep roads and bridges safe, and we will free up dollars for congestion relief and mobility improvements across the state. Without the fix, the estimate is if we don't fix this maintenance deficit over the next 6 years, we will have to sweep $3 billion from the construction account into the maintenance account to maintain our road system. And just to order of magnitude, that means that the $3 billion bond package we did last year will not be an advance in transportation. It will just enable us to basically stand still against that massive sucking of money out of the Transportation Trust Fund into maintenance. And so there is a need to come up with a fix, and that's what this plan does as its first thing, safety first. How do we propose to fund it? I'm going to fund an elimination of this maintenance deficit in 2 ways. First, I'm going to propose raising the motor vehicle sales tax, which is currently at 3% to 4%, and then putting the entire 4% of auto sales tax proceeds into the maintenance fund. Right now, the auto sales tax is 3% when the sales tax on everything else is 5%. If you're trying to find money for transportation improvements, it makes no sense to have such a deep discount on the sales tax on automobiles. Of the current 3%, 2% goes into the maintenance fund, 1% goes into the Transportation Trust Fund. So I'm not only proposing to raise it from 3 to 4, but I'm proposing to take all of the auto sales tax proceeds and put them into filling up the maintenance deficit. In addition, and I will point out, in addition, I am also going to propose increasing the annual vehicle registration fee in Virginia by $10 and earmarking that approximately $70 million into the maintenance fund. Both of these revenue sources, a 1% increase in auto title tax and a $10 increase in the vehicle registration fee, were approved by wide margins of the General Assembly as part of the regional plans in 2007 that were struck down by the Supreme Court. So these are revenue sources that have already been identified and already been voted on by the General Assembly, albeit in regional plans just 1 year ago. Again, I stress it's important, I think, to raise this vehicle tax because it doesn't seem to be serious that we're trying to tackle a transportation problem at the same time as having the vehicle sales tax so much less than the sales tax on a bottle of water or a candy bar or something else. The statewide maintenance fix that I've described, 3 to 4% earmark into the Transportation Maintenance Fund and $10 registration, will provide $445 million during fiscal year 09, rising to $512 million in fiscal year 2014. It will fix the maintenance deficit for at least 5 years. After that, the projections become a little bit uncertain, but this will enable us to solve that problem of fixing and maintaining roads and bridges while freeing up dollars for construction. And it will be a truth in budgeting effort instead of trying to cobble together these maintenance funds at year end. That's point one. And you can see basically with these two charts up here what happens. The current amount of construction without the plan I'm proposing is the red chart. You can see it increase, but then starts to drop dramatically in fiscal year 11 as the growing maintenance needs really start to hollow out the construction fund. And by fiscal year 2019, the amount of statewide construction dollars would be less than $500 million. The maintenance account, which is the gray amount, you'll see those maintenance needs grow very significantly between now and 2019. With the plan I am proposing, these two revenue sources into the maintenance fund, you'll see that we're able to keep track of maintenance generally, and the blue line shows what happens to construction. Construction stays over $1 billion, not less than $500 million. You may wonder why it drops between 2017 and 2019. That's because by that point all the bonding from last year will have been issued, and those bonds will now be taken out of the system because they'll already be out on the street. But without fixing this maintenance deficit, you can see that the construction account dwindles to next to nothing. You can also see the chart here, the maintenance deficit, which is worsening and worsening, and actually becomes a positive. You get to 2014, there are some circumstances where it could be back in negative mode, but again, it's a little bit difficult to project the income out that far. But at the very least, you can compare the blue chart in 2014 to the red chart. We would be at nearly $600 million of maintenance deficit by 2014 if we don't act. The second piece of the plan is regional relief. We know that there are major congestion problems in Hampton Roads in Northern Virginia. Those major problems led the legislature last year to enact regional plans in each of those jurisdictions to meet infrastructure needs of those two communities. Just a couple of statistics. Congestion steals time. In Hampton Roads last year, congestion stole about 25 million hours of time of people who are sitting in traffic that they shouldn't have to. And in Northern Virginia, a staggering amount, 127 million hours last year of congestion. Congestion also wastes gas, a precious commodity these days as you're sitting there not moving with your engine running. 17 million gallons last year in Hampton Roads and 91 million gallons last year in Northern Virginia. There's a cost to that. There's a cost to the time and there's a cost to the wasted gas. And the cost is staggering. $467 million in Hampton Roads last year, $2.3 billion in Northern Virginia. And the problem is worsening. The congestion challenges in those regions are worsening. And it's not just a regional problem. Those regions are economically the two most powerful regions in the state, the two largest metropolitan areas. Not only are there many assets in those regions that benefit the entire state, but the economic success of those regions, because of the way state funding takes place, is very, very powerful in helping localities fund schools and worker retraining programs all over the Commonwealth. It's bad for Virginia if congestion is allowed to persist in these two most sizable regions. So we've got to have specific relief for the regions, just as the General Assembly recognized and recommended in 2007. I propose to fund regional relief in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads in a fairly straightforward way by having a 1% regional sales tax imposed by the state in the two regions. It would not be imposed on food or medicine. It would be imposed on other items. That 1% regional sales tax in Northern Virginia would raise $306 million in 2009, rising to $414 million in 2014. Those funds would be in addition to current monies that are being used for the hot lanes on the Beltway and for Dulles Rail, and would give Northern Virginia some significant ability to address very targeted goals of Northern Virginia: metro funding, VRE funding, and some identified road projects. We would devote those dollars to the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, which has been in existence for a number of years, that has the confidence of the elected officials and others in Northern Virginia. In Hampton Roads, the 1% sales tax increase would convert to $168 million in 2009, rising to $227 million in 2014. I would propose, and I'll work with local legislators on this, but I've chatted with them about it significantly, to abolish the Hampton Roads Transportation Authority. The funds would be held in a Hampton Roads specific account and used only for designated projects in Hampton Roads. The designated projects would be the 6 identified by the Metropolitan Planning Organization and included in House Bill 3202, and also a 7th project, improvements to the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. All monies raised in these two regions would stay in the regions. The revenue source, the 1% sales tax, has obviously been much discussed, even recently by legislators have had meetings and talked about using the regional sales tax as a vehicle for funding transportation improvements. And I put the 1% sales tax in to show that I've been listening. You know, I'm watching to see what people have voted yes for already, or what they are talking about as a potential solution to these problems. In addition, in the regional area, the regional relief, I would propose to eliminate the local income tax option that is available to communities in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads. The authority of communities to raise local option income tax for transportation has been in the Code of Virginia since the late 1980s. Localities have been wanting to use it because they wanted the state to step forward and take infrastructure responsibility seriously. if we are imposing these regional sales taxes and the monies will stay in the region, I think we should abolish the local income tax authority. I've spoken with the mayors and board chairs of the communities in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads who generally have their assent to that motion. Again, if we look at what the effect of this regional money would be on the two regions, the charts here would show it. The red bars in each year would show the 6-year program for transit and highways in Hampton Roads and in Northern Virginia. The plan is not adopted. The plan I described is adopted. You'll see the blue chart shows the money that can be done, the money that can be spent. Hampton Roads going from $250 million to over $500 million a year. In Northern Virginia going from a declining amount, $600 to $500 million to $400 million a year to over $1 billion of new capacity for the Northern Virginia area. Finally, the third theme is transportation change. We can't just pave our way out of the problem, the transportation problem that we have. That was recognized in some powerful ways. The Speaker's bill, House Bill 3202, and some other legislation that we had worked on in the 06 and 07 years point out the need for new coordination of land use decisions, and also the importance of Virginia beginning to better fund public transportation. That's been a real weakness in our state, real weakness in many areas of our state, and so many people rely on public transportation. The poor, the elderly, those with disabilities, and increasingly with the price of gas going up, public transit has been in hot demand in communities that have it. You'll notice at the beginning when I talked about the maintenance fund, one of the items I'm going to do is take all the auto title tax and put it in the maintenance fund. So there was a penny in there that was in the transportation capacity fund that isn't anymore, and I felt the need to recharge that. Recharge with some new revenue source, new capacity, but do it in a different way to show that Virginia is embracing the notion that people should have choices with transportation, and it isn't all about roads. And so the Transportation Change Fund, which is the third element of the proposal, funds transit and rail in a significant way, and also economic development, particular economic development initiatives where transportation improvements are necessary to bring good opportunities to the state. I propose to fund this Transportation Change Fund as follows: to impose a 25-cent statewide grantors tax, which would raise $142 million annually. The current statewide grantors tax is 10 cents. You'll recall that the legislature in 2007 voted for a 40-cent grantors tax increase in the two most populous regions of the state. With that grantors tax imposed statewide, we would allocate the money as follows. 75% of it would go for rail, public transit, or innovations like telework and telecommuting that have the prospect of reducing congestion through smart strategies. 13.5% of the money would go into economic development. It's very common. I mean, just a week or 2 weeks back when we did the announcement of an economic development project in Newport News for Kaine, it is likely that that economic development expansion will require road improvements. I was recently in Wythe County visiting a significant economic development opportunity there, the opening of a new Gatorade plant that needed both road and rail access. These economic development deals now need transportation improvements, so 13.5% of this transportation change fund will be put into that, and 11.5% will be earmarked directly into the port of Hampton Roads and its related inland ports and the general aviation airports around Virginia. As I mentioned, this 25-cent grantors tax, a version of it, a 40-cent version, was voted on last year by the General Assembly overwhelmingly in the two regional packages. And the way I look at this is, together with the 2007 earmark of 2 pennies on the recordation tax to public transit, this Transportation Change Fund will continue to push a major reorientation of spending in Virginia to give people more choices at a time when the demand for transit and rail are increasing. We'll give people more choices and we'll build out a more robust network in those areas. To summarize, the plan will improve safety, it will provide relief to the 2 most congested parts of Virginia, and it will continue a pattern of change toward more choices for businesses and consumers. The total new funding of the 3 elements I've described is $859 million in 2009, rising to slightly under $1.1 billion in 2014. All the revenue sources, the 4 that I've discussed, have been previously discussed at length by the General Assembly, and overwhelming majorities of the General Assembly have voted for these revenue sources in one way or another in the past 5 or 6 years. So these are not new items. It could minimize the amount of tire kicking and questions to rely on revenue sources that have been previously embraced by both caucuses in both houses in significant numbers. A natural question that some might ask, and if I didn't mention it, I'm sure you would, is, well, why not a gas tax? And let me just address that. Gas hit a record price again today, and people are feeling very hard hit by the gas tax. My sense in talking to citizens around Virginia and businesses is that they view the gas tax like they view the tax on food and medicine. They view gas as a necessity. For so many, gas is a necessity of life. They have to spend it in order to get to work. They have to spend it in order to get their kids to school, get to doctor's appointments. So many Virginians live in places that aren't accessible to public transportation. And if they can't find gas, they can't live the life that they are accustomed to. And it is such a difficult time for people right now because of the price of gas. So because people are hard hit and so many do view gas as a necessity of life, I've tried to put this plan together in a way that avoided the gas tax, that nevertheless did the job without relying on the gas tax. It is also the case that the political opposition to the gas tax is very strong. Before I was even inaugurated as governor, when I talked to the leadership of the legislature, the Republican leadership, they made plain to me that the gas tax would be the toughest sell, the single element that would be hardest ever to approve as part of the transportation package. And I've seen nothing in the 2.5 years I've been governor to disprove that warning that I was given. And so I felt like if I put out a plan that relied heavily on a gas tax, I would be putting out a plan that I know would send a message: I don't want to try to work to find a resolution. I do want to work to find a resolution, and that's why I've constructed the plan as I have. We've got to do this plan, or some version of it, that raises the same amount of money if we want to secure a strong future for the Commonwealth of Virginia. No state with a declining infrastructure can maintain its place as a leader. It's impossible. Governing Magazine on March 3rd did their once every 3-year analysis of American states, and for the second time in a row put Virginia as the top performing state government in the United States, tied with Utah and Washington with an A- grade. But if you look at the analysis that Governing Magazine performed, you find that we did a couple of things well and even improved, but there was a big glaring area where we dropped from an A grade, A- grade, to a B+, and that was in infrastructure. We are not funding infrastructure as we should in this Commonwealth. We are not investing in that basic economic infrastructure that we need to be successful. That grade is going to continue to go down. People are going to sit longer and longer in traffic or be deprived of options that they need to have a good quality of life unless we address it in a resolute manner. There is also a positive to doing this now. Even in a tough economy, even when it's a tough time to talk about raising these revenues, there is something positive about it. Better transportation infrastructure translates into better economic development. That is always a feature of any economic development deal that I put in place, and I often find myself having to try to explain what we'll do to try to catch up or make sure that we have a transportation infrastructure that's sufficient. If we make these investments, we will put ourselves in a position where we continue to be an economically powerful state, and we'll have a short-term benefit too, because investing in transportation is that kind of infrastructure investment that creates construction jobs and other jobs that can help fuel and push an economic recovery that I hope we will see. I'm going to go around the state, as I mentioned, in a series of town hall meetings and discussions with chambers of commerce and groups of citizens between now and June 23rd, talking about the magnitude of the need and talking about the fact that we can improve safety, provide regional relief, and change in a positive direction our transportation investments to secure a strong future. I think this is a good plan and a solid plan, but I would not say that it's a perfect plan. This year I was struck in working with the General Assembly that I introduced a great plan for investing in higher ed capital, and at the end of the day it was a better plan. The project list was pretty much as I put it into place, but the General Assembly process over that 6 or 8 weeks produced some mechanisms for cost estimation and issuing bonds that I thought were positive improvements to what I proposed. I introduced a plan to reform the community mental health system of Virginia, and the legislature engaged in it. Very, very challenging questions and dialogue, and at the end of the day, while the dollar investment was what I proposed, there were many elements of the plan that were improvements on what I proposed. And that's the way this is supposed to work. I don't say this is perfect. I think it is a very solid plan that shows that I'm meeting the need and that I've listened to folks. But I encourage the legislature And that's why I'm issuing the plan now 6 weeks before the special session, to kick the tires and talk about it. We've seen some interesting things happen with members of the Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads delegation meeting together to talk about the needs that they both experience. I hope that they'll have a meeting and maybe take this up and chat about it. But while we can talk and while we can adjust and while we can improve and while we can modify, we do have to act. The General Assembly has to act. I'm very aware of my powers as governor. I get to propose, but I don't have a vote. The votes have to take place in the General Assembly. And the General Assembly must act because its reputation and our reputation are at stake. Both houses, both parties, all regions have to work together if we're going to solve this important problem. We did it on these other items in early 2008, as I mentioned on the outset. Foster care reform, pre-K, college capital, mental health reform. We worked across party lines, in both houses, and across regional lines to make big strides forward in a tough year. We can do it again in transportation. The only issue is, do we want to? With that, I'll take your questions.